We rescued this dining table from the trash a couple of months ago and I refinished it, and since then we've been using it as our dining table. There's only two problems with it. The first is that there's no leaves, and we definitely need some, so I'm going to make some. I have another bit of salvaged tabletop from the trash. This is maple, and we've been using this to practice, sort of gives us an idea if we like the size and just how big of a leaf we're going to need, but clearly this is not going to do because it does not match. And the second issue is that this old table is about 2 inches too short. As you can see, I've got it on blocks here. We like a tabletop between 29.5 and 30.5 inches tall. And without those blocks, this was only a bit over 28 inches tall. I'll put up a link to the video where I rescued and refinished this table. You might want to go watch that one first if you haven't seen it already. If we take a close look at the top of this table, you can just see how it's loaded with ray fleck and other quarter sawn figure. So whatever leaves I make, I've got to match this. I've got a strong light right here trying to show you when a board is quarter sawn, that means that the grain is basically straight up and down here in the end, which in white oak leads to all these ray flecks. So at my local lumber yard, I spent a lot of time picking and sorting, and the owner was okay with that. In fact, he was helping me because he was interested in my project. So we spent a lot of time sorting through the piles to get 3 boards that had lots of ray fleck and figure. And so that should give me enough wood to make 2 leaves that are about 10 to 12 inches wide, 45 inches long. In fact, 2 of the boards probably would have done it, but always buy an extra board. So I'm going to cut 2 of these in half, and this other one has got some damage at the end, and I will be cutting a chunk here. Actually, on second thought, I'm just going to cut 2 boards. That should be enough if I'm careful, and I've always got the 3rd board if I have to, but let's try to save wood. Well, it's definitely white oak. It's got the scent of white oak when I cut it. This one board is quite curved here, so it'll take forever on the jointer, so I'm going to use a straight edge here, and I'm going to just cut off this big lump on the bandsaw freehand. It starts at 0, but here it's well over 1/4 inch, but then it tapers right back to 0 again. There's a matching curve on this side, otherwise I would just use this side on the joiner. This one piece has this junky split at this one end, so I'm going to have to rip it down at about 5.5 inches to just take that off. It's too bad because the rest of the board is quite nice, but I need the length. And after the joiner, it was time to spend some quality time with my planer. I'm not taking them to finished thickness tonight. The boards had a little bow to them, so I'm just going to do some light planing, and then I'm going to stack and sticker them and let them rest for a day or two, and then bring them down to final thickness. I was a little concerned because the boards were a bit bowed, but so far it's turning out really good, and I think it was the right move to save that 3rd board because I think these 4 pieces are going to give me enough for 2. Like that's 10 3/4, that's over 11, so I should be able to get 2 10.5 inch leaves out of this. You can see all the ray flecks in these boards. Here they're going a little bit more subtly. This one's got a whole bunch of it, so quite happy with it so far. I stopped my thicknessing at about 7/8. I've got this caliper set on the actual table, and so I still have quite a bit of board to take off because the actual leaves that I need to make are going to be just a hair over 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to let these rest now. And in fact, I'm probably going to glue them up first because once they're together, they still will fit through my planer, and then I can take them down to final thickness. But that'll be in a few days. All right, I took yesterday off. These have had 2 days to sit. Everything feels pretty flat. Let's check. All right, with 4 flat boards, let's make a couple leaves. I always take a moment to sort the boards before I glue them together because I want to make sure that I've got the grain matching in the best and the color matching. Now I kind of lost track of which board was which, but based on the color, and a few other markings. I think these two boards are from the same original board, and so I want to put them together because I want to keep the color consistent. And this part is not so exciting to watch, but I find it really important. Let's see what the other side looks like, because this might have to actually go on the bottom. Yeah, that still looks pretty good. So let's mark this one. I want these two like that. And after all that, I have to go back to the joiner. I need to joint a nice clean edge for where they are going to glue together. I'll often use dowels to align boards when I really want to make sure there's a nice perfect alignment. However, these boards are quite flat and they are already well aligned, and I will be sending them through the planer again. So I think I can skip that, and I'm just going to glue them up as is. The dowels don't give any strength in this situation. They would be just for alignment. Getting a nice glue squeeze out all the way along. And I love the parallel clamps, but it adds a fair bit of weight. Set that aside to dry. And again, for the other one. That's one, and that's two. I got a nice flat glue joint on both of them. And now just a little bit more planing to take them down to the final thickness which matches the table. But I'm going to be very careful and set the planer to the slower speed, and I will also be taking only like quarter turn at a time so that it's taking very light cuts. And after each pass, I'm going to test the thickness to make sure that I am not yet at the desired thickness. And when it's close in thickness, I'm going to bring it out to the actual table and compare it. I think I'm done. So of my two pieces now, the skinnier one is just a hair under 10 1/4 inches, so I'm going to rip them now so they're both the identical thickness. One bright spot is I was able to completely cut off this junky bit here at the end. There is a little bit of burning there, but I will just run this over the jointer for a quick cleanup pass. So the next step I want to take with these leaves is drill these alignment holes and fit the alignment pins. I'm going to use these 3/8 dowels for alignment pins. These are from my doweling kit. These dowels that I'm planning to use are pretty much the same size as the ones that are mounted in the table now, but interestingly, if you look at the alignment holes, the dowel fits in there perfectly, and in fact there's a fair bit of wiggle, so either these holes were made with loose tolerances, or maybe actually cone-shaped even, or they've just worn out a bit over the years. You can buy nice, smooth, bullet-tip dowels on Amazon in the US. I'll put a link to those down below. I'm just going to use these. I think they'll be fine. The table has 3 alignment pins, so that's how many we need to put in our leaves. So to drill those 3 holes, they clearly need to be in the exact right position in the leaf, but even more importantly, they need to be in the right vertical plane, because you want the leaf to line up flush with the top of the table as much as possible. So I did some research online, and I found a couple of videos of people where they showed a jig like this. And what this is just a scrap piece cut off the leaf, so it's the exact same thickness as the leaf. And then these little cross pieces, they're just alignment pieces. So you can take this and you can put this along the edge of the leaf, and then when you clamp it into place, this will hold this little jig so it's perfectly flush with the top of the piece. And then once you've drilled the holes on this side of the leaf, you will move it to the other side, clamp it with the other end, and then you will drill through that way. So there are 1, 2, 3 holes in this, but getting those holes in the right spot was still a bit of a trick. So in order to make the jig, I first practiced on this piece of scrap, which is also the same thickness as the table. And as you can see, I first drilled one hole and then the other, and these are all at varying heights, trying to get the alignment just right. I was trying my Dowel Max jig with varying shims, and I ended up just using like a little scrap of a fridge magnet that I cut. And even then, I had to accept the fact that I'm working with an antique, which is itself not perfect. So each time I would drill a hole and I would bring it out to the table to fit it. So here on my last hole, I brought it out to the table and that feels perfectly flush. And on the middle alignment pin, it feels perfectly flush. But on this third one, on this third alignment pin, there's just a little bit of a rub there. And it's like, it's a 100-year-old table. I mean, these alignment pins are maybe not perfectly in alignment, and it was almost unnoticeable. I'm just being very honest and upfront and picky. It just surprised me that it was perfectly smooth on the first 2 pins and that I could feel on the third one that it wasn't. I mean, I don't know, maybe a 32nd of an inch or closer to a 16th and a 32nd. I mean, it's enough that the finger feels it, but you don't really notice it. I just wanted to be completely upfront. So, you know, I could cut them off and drill new pins into the table, but I don't want to do that. This table is borderline antique and I want to keep it as original as possible. So I made this drilling guide such that it fits into the table like this, and this cross piece at the end lines up with the edge of the table, so that's where you want the edge of your leaf to be when you're using the drilling guide. So then I'll place my leaf here. I'm going to make a mark here, and then I'll strike a line across, and that's what I will use with lining up the drilling jig. I'm using one of my dowel jig drill bits, which has a nice stop collar, and I'll use that to set it so it's just, say, a little bit more than half, something like that. I've got the leaf marked for what I want to be the top face. I'll put the jig in place, line it up with that pencil line, and clamp it in place at each of these little stick positions. That way this is nicely flush here so that the hole is right where I want it to be. This is another one of those operations where you prepare and you prepare and you measure and you measure and you get everything right, and the preparation is ages and ages, and then the actual procedure is just 3 holes. And of course these holes will wear out, but I'm only doing 2 leaves, which means I'm only doing 12 holes. If you were doing many leaves, you'd want a jig that's, you know, had some sort of hardened steel insert, or come up with some other method that's more accurate. So the pins go on this side and this side of the leaves, not this side. And I'll just clamp them together in the vise so that I'll just hold them upright so I can put the pins in. These are 3/8 inch dowels that are 1.5 inches long. Now I really don't want any squeeze out, so I'm going to put a blob of glue in each hole. And then use a large toothpick to just sort of grab it and smear it around the sides of the holes. And these are fluted dowels, so the glue should just sort of go up along the sides. There we go. Oh, that one's got just a little bit. I'll just get rid of that. And we'll let this dry, and then we can do a test fit. So with the pins in place, they fit nicely onto the table. However, they are a little tight with each other. So I need to either make the holes a little bigger or I need to make the pins a little smaller. So I think I'm going to take these and I'm just going to sand at them for a little bit, and then we'll try again. So I put the drill bit in these on slow speed and just wiggled it a bit to make it bigger. And then I used some 100 grit sandpaper on the nubs to smooth them down a bit. And that is okay. So now, as you can see, these are too long. I'm just taking the square and lining it up, and here there's just a little bit of an edge, so and that's what I want to cut off. I want to stay outside the line though. But while it's mounted in the table, I'm also going to draw a line on the bottom so I can mark where this apron needs to go under the leaves. Next thing I need to do is make some short apron pieces to go under these leaves, and for that I've prepared some stock out of some of the leftover white oak, and I need to cut that to size now, and then I will be fastening that to the end. And it's going to go something like that. Now these are cross grain joints, so I'm not going to be gluing them. In fact, I'm going to be using pocket hole joinery to attach them. Hold your outrage, because the apron on the antique is actually attached with pocket hole joinery though. They used slotted screws, and I'll be using square head screws. Before I got too far along, I stopped and I put a round over on the inside edge of these apron pieces with my router table. I like to check my pocket hole screws with a manual screwdriver because you can blow right through the end, so I purposefully use a fairly light drill when putting them in. Off screen, I prepared a bunch of little corner blocks. I just traced the ones that are on the existing table and then cut these out of some of the white oak scraps. These will go at each end of the table leaf like this to support the little apron fragment. This is long grain to long grain, so I put a little dab of glue just on the bottom. And I'll lay that in right there beside the screw hole. And then on each one I'm going to mark, pre-drill, countersink, and then I'm putting in a number 6 screw, which is 1 inch long. And do that twice on each one of the supports. And with those brackets in place, these leaves are basically finished. They just need some sanding, stain, and finish. But I'm not finished with the table yet. It is looking really good, but we still have the problem of the height because it's only a hair over 28 inches tall right now. So then the issue to be decided is how I'm going to raise the table. I'm going to raise it at the bottom, or going to raise it at the top, or if you recall back at the beginning of the video, I had these little blocks that I'd made and I had put them underneath the table when I had it just for practice, but yeah, they look hideous. However, I did think it would be good to add some leveling feet to the bottom of the table, so I bought a bunch off of Amazon, but they come with these really long posts on them, and I'm like, those are gonna drill right through the feet. So I prepared some stock, just a 1/2 inch thick, and I thought, well, I'll just put a little 1/2 inch block here at the bottom of each foot, and that will give me enough room to mount these leveling feet. But I discovered that the bottom of these feet are not flat. So I want to glue a piece of wood on there, and it's going to end up rocking. I'm not going to get a good glue bond. This had me scratching my head for a bit, but the simple solution was I took out my angle grinder and I simply cut the posts shorter on 4 of these leveling feet. So I now have enough room to drill a hole here in the middle of the leg, and I'll be able to fit in this leveling foot. These feet come with these mounting flanges, and to get those in I have a 3/8 drill bit where I have a piece of flagging tape set so I don't drill too deep, and then you can see here I've already got one mounted, so I've measured in 2 1/4 inches and made a mark in the middle so that I can proceed with drilling, and I just have to be careful to make sure I stop when the flagging tape gets there. There we go. These adjustable feet are about a 1/2 inch thick at the base, so that'll raise up my table by a 1/2 inch. So that's a 1/2 inch of the 2 inches that I needed. So I still need another 1.5 inches of height, and so instead of at the bottom of the pedestal, I'm going to be looking at the top of the pedestal for that extra 1.5 inches. At the top of the pedestal, we have these boards which are used to attach to the table, and there's a big hole in each one where a bolt goes through and then a wing nut. So let's get this tabletop in here. These are the 4 bolts on the underside of the tabletop structure, and these go through those matching holes in the base, and then they're attached with wing nuts. So the bolts are long, but they're not that much longer. So I went into my scrap pile and I found some scrap hardwood, and I made some blocks that are 1.5 inches tall. And these blocks are now going to go on the underside of the structure here. And I'm going to remove the bolts and set them into these new blocks. Again, I'm trying to make changes without radically altering this piece. I want to be able to return it to its original state if somebody really wanted to for some reason. So it's been a little while since the last scene, and long story short, I can't use these bolts. I figured out they were 5/16 bolts. I found a matching nut, and you need to use 2 nuts jammed together to get these out, and there's just no way I could get the nuts on. I even ended up trying to chase the threads with a tap and die set, and that ended up ruining it. It was very strange because the wing nuts that came with this table, they worked perfectly on some 5/16 bolts, but the reverse would not happen. So I ended up going out and buying some new hanger bolts, and I'm just going to have to remove these and replace them. And before taking out these bolts, I first used my new support blocks, and I marked from the old bolts where I need to put the new carriage bolts in these, and I also drew a line here on the end, and I marked them A and A, and this is B and B, so that I make sure I put these in the right place when I install them. And hopefully the old vice grip will just be enough to get these out. Oh, sounds like, there we go, no problem. That's one, there's number two, and just two more times after this. And then over on the drill press, I put in a 1/4-inch drill bit to drill new pilot holes for the hanger bolts for the new support blocks. I'm going to hold these in place with a couple of 2-inch brads, and then after that I will be able to pre-drill and put in some longer 3-inch screws to hold this to the structure. I didn't use any glue here because I want to be able to remove it if I ever want to return it to an original antique piece. And now to insert these new hanger bolts, you need 2 nuts on the end. And you take these and you tighten them against each other, making a jam nut situation. And now you have a bolt that you can turn to get it inserted. And afterwards we can loosen the nuts and take them off. And now it's all set to be mounted on the base, and it will be raised up by 1.5 inches after I do it 3 more times. And then the base should fit over like this. Okay, that confirms it fits, but I think I better stain this dark so it doesn't stand out so much. Okay, that's a lot better. These 2 boards now match the understructure a lot better. I actually filmed this clip after I'd started staining, but it really fits here in the video. A little bit of glue on here. And then I'm just going to tack it in place while the glue dries, because I want to continue with finishing. For finishing the leaves, I'm going to use the same finishing regimen that I used for when I refinished this table. I'm going to sand these to 220 grit, then I'm going to apply a Varathane gel stain, dark walnut, to the top and the bottom of it. After that will come a coat of shellac, and followed by several coats of polyurethane. And when it's all done, they should all just look like the same color. And we got a problem. Or rather, I got a problem. Because the color's wrong. And this one's entirely on me. I can see my mistake now. I thought, this is white oak, this is white oak. I'm using the exact same process to finish them with the same stain, then shellac, then polyurethane. And I should have stopped after I did the staining and put the 2 of them beside each other, but I was in a rush. I'm trying to get this done. I've been doing this for a long time. But I think I know what the issue is. So remember, the main table is something I rescued from the trash and I refinished. And of course, I stripped it down to bare wood, but there was still stain in the pores and in the lines, and I just totally forgot that. And so this one probably had a bit more color to begin with, and this of course was completely raw bare wood when I started. I suppose the age of the table may have played a role too, because of course the main table is about 100 years old, and this is fresh wood that was milled sometime in the last, I don't know how long. One other little thing is I'm not 100% sure, but I might have stained the table twice when I was refinishing. I reviewed my footage and I couldn't find any reference to that, and this only got 1 coat of stain because I ran out. So here's a close-up, and I think the camera's doing a fairly good job. This is the table, which has definitely got some more reddish orange color to it, and this is just, it's just brown. So, and the only thing to do is to break out the sander and strip off the polyurethane and shellac and start over again. I bought myself another can of the stain, and I also bought a cherry stain because I want to have some orangey colors to meld in. I am only going to strip the top and the ends. The underside doesn't really matter. 80 grit. Now 150. Now you can see how there's definitely still color deep in the grain, which is what the table had. I'm going to finish it off with 220, but I'm going to do this by hand. Just going with the grain. Apologies for the sound. I've got an exhaust fan going because I'm at the point of starting to stain, and I'm thinking I'm going to actually put the cherry on first to try to get that orangey base and then put a coat of the walnut on top. I might experiment on the end pieces first because they're small, but I'm definitely going to have one of them. I'm going to do the staining right in the table middle there, just because I want to really be sure about the color. So there's the cherry, and there's the dark walnut. Here's the cherry. Let that sit for 2 minutes, wipe it off, and then I'm going to come right on top of it with the walnut. Let's see. Everything's an experiment. I'm trying to compare, but it's really hard. I think I'm just going to have to press on and give it a try. Here it is with the cherry stain has been applied and wiped off. There's the other one with the cherry stain applied and wiped off compared to that one. Now onto the dark walnut. Summing up what I did, after sanding it, I first put on a coat of the cherry, wiped that off. That gave it an orangey red look to it. And I went over it with some of the dark walnut, let that set up, wiped it off. Thought it was looking good, but a bit brown, so I put on some more of the cherry. That I felt made it look too light, so I wonder if it ate away at the walnut a bit. Wiped that down after it had set for 2 minutes, and then put on the fourth coat, which is the second time I went back to the walnut. And that's where I'm sitting right now, and I think I'm going to stop there. Needs to dry for 6 hours before I can go on with the shellac. So the next morning, which is this morning, I came down and I took a good look at it with fresh eyes, and I decided it still wasn't quite a perfect match. So I took a really big risk and I pulled out yet another stain. This is a Minwax Red Chestnut. Different company, different type of stain, so a different chemical formulation. So yeah, it was very risky, and I spread a coat over, let it soak in, wiped it off, and yeah, that I think was good enough. Since then I've done 2 coats of shellac and I've done 2 coats of polyurethane. I got 1 more coat of polyurethane yet to do, but I'm pretty happy with the colors. At least I don't think I'm going to get any better. But with that, I think I've accomplished the goals of this project. So let's bring it upstairs. I made 2 leaves, but we're just going to have 1 in the table for everyday use. This one will stay in storage and will be brought out whenever we have a larger group over. I put a washer and a wing nut here under each of these threaded bolts. And with the wing nuts on, the table is fully attached to the base. It's nice and solid. And when you're looking straight on, even down low, you can't even see that board that I used here to raise up the height of the top. You'd have to crawl under the table and look up to be able to find it. And that about wraps it up. We got the table raised up a couple inches, which it desperately needed, and we added some leaves and we got a really good grain match on the wood. So that's about it for this one. We'll see you on the next one.